Joining me now in studio, Javier Manjarres, the managing editor of SharkTank.com. And again, to see that, you put the hyphen in the middle, right?
Correct. Shark-tank.com.
We've got it. Javier is here in studio, Skyping in from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. We've got Democratic strategist Bridget Todd. Bridget, it's good to have you along today, and we want to thank you both very much for spending some time with us on this Friday.
Thanks for having me.
Javier, you're in studio. We'll go to you first. Where does the blame fall in this issue?
President Obama. Look, we've been saying this before. This influx of illegal immigrants has been happening over the past year. It has been happening for years now, even through Reagan, through Clinton, through Bush, but more so now because they see this as their opportunity to come here before another possibly Republican president again, who will be tougher on immigration, who will enforce laws. And Obama has shown has shown not so much failed foreign policy, but failed immigration reform, law policy. He doesn't enforce the laws that exist. And I think this is due to help the Democrats down the road possibly garner more Democrat votes, because people suppose that immigrants that come here will vote Democrat down the road.
Well, you mentioned the president being to blame. Now, we'll get Bridget's point of view on this in just a second, but let's hear from the president himself well, he has said some things on the road about this ongoing crisis. Take a listen.
But the House Republicans, they haven't even called the bill. They won't even take a vote on the bill. They don't have enough energy or organization or I don't know what to just even vote no on the bill. And then they're mad at me for trying to do some things to make the immigration system work better. So it doesn't make sense.
So Bridget, is this a common sense way for the president to try and reach out and build bipartisan support to finally get a solution to this?
You know, I think it's an issue that's very frustrating. I think, if you've been paying attention, you've seen that Obama has actually been trying to build bipartisan support for fixing our very broken immigration system. And I think we continue to see that. I think it's a frustrating issue. I think, I don't think it's wrong to paint this issue as a real humanitarian crisis. We have children who need to be in their homes, who are, fleeing very serious, very dangerous situations. And I think that it's fair to paint this as a humanitarian issue. And I think bipartisan support, he's been trying that. I think to say that he hasn't been trying that is just does not go with the facts of the situation. And I think it's a situation that something really has to get done, because it really is becoming a humanitarian issue, a crisis with these kids.
Bridget, let me ask you, and we'll get Javier's take on this in just a second. Are these illegals coming into the country, or are you wanting to change their designation to, quote, refugees?
I mean, I think it's different when it's children. I think, I really want to refocus the narrative of sort of this idea of whether they're illegals or not. I think these are kids. These are kids fleeing very dangerous situations. And I think we need to really keep that in mind, that, this idea of like whether they're illegals, I think that it really does take really thinking about this issue the way it is and seeing it as not, an issue to score political points or posturing, really an issue about these children who are fleeing very serious, very dangerous circumstances.
Javier, your take on this. Are these, quote, children, and are they refugees?
Yes, there are a lot of them are children, but there are also a lot of adults mixed in. So again, what makes a refugee? If you look at Syria, people who cross over from Syria to, let's say, Jordan, men, women, and children. Look, I'm not going to say they're all refugees. Look, at the end of the day, they're illegal aliens. Let's be very clear. U.S. Department gives out resident alien cards. Resident alien cards. These are illegal aliens. Bottom line, look, at the end of the day, we'll fix this immigration policy, disastrous as it may be, if we enforce the laws. If we enforce the laws, there's no issues with immigration.
This is going on primarily in Texas, as we see some of the video of these kids being lifted on to those trains, bringing them up. Texas junior Senator Ted Cruz took to the floor of the Senate to offer his perspective on the president's role in this crisis. Here is Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas.
There's one thing President Obama has said about what's happening that is absolutely correct. This is a humanitarian disaster. But it is a disaster of the president's own making. It is a disaster that is the direct consequence of President Obama's lawlessness.
He says it's President Obama's lawlessness. The administration says, hey, wait a minute, we reauthorized the William Wilberforce Act. Bridget, your take on what Ted Cruz had to say there?
You know, I think, as Javier mentioned before, I think there's plenty of blame to go around. I think this has been an issue we've been dealing with since before President Obama was ever in the White House. This is an issue that we've been dealing with from a policy level for quite some time, for a very long time. And I think to say, oh, it's one policy or one president is just completely limiting, and it just doesn't make any sense to the actual reality of the situation. I think a lot of the blame has to be put at Congress, who seems to be completely unwilling to act and to pass any kind of legislation that might attempt to deal with
speaking of legislation, Bridget, on the screen right now, the particulars of the William Wilberforce Trafficking Victims Protection Act, first signed into law by Republican President George W. Bush in late December 2008, reauthorized by our current president in 2013. Javier, this law is in place. Do you expect the House and Senate to move to essentially repeal this piece of legislation?
Well, my question is, if the law is in place, why is it enforced? You know, let's enforce the laws that already exist. I mean, what the young lady's saying is, look, the Congress isn't doing anything. Why does the Congress have to act on any new legislation when there's already legislation that exists? Why doesn't the president enforce those laws and then supplement it with any other law that may maybe secure the border even more? I agree with that, but look, at the end of the day, we need to secure the borders with existing laws. We're a country of laws. Don't we all agree with that?
That is something we have been told, something that I've served in Congress 6 terms to try and reaffirm. Bridget, in this situation yesterday, the president really spent the better part of 2 days in Texas. He did sit down with Governor Perry, but he did not visit the border. Do you think it would have been wise for the president to make a trip to the border?
I mean, listen, Obama has been very clear that he doesn't want this issue to turn into political theater, as he puts it, or a photo opportunity. I agree with that. I mean, I almost kind of think that it doesn't matter sort of whether he physically visits. And let's be clear, Jay Johnson has visited 6 times in Obama's direction. So it isn't like, you know, it's not being dealt with, it's not being seen. I tend to personally think that, you know, that you need to see these kids, see these children who are coming in. But whether or not he visits or not, I feel like that's a question that really takes us away from the spirit of this argument, which is really to say that it's a humanitarian issue. I completely agree with Javier that it's an issue that needs to be dealt with. It's an issue of securing our borders and making sure folks are going to be safe. But I think any conversation or question that takes us away from that reality is not a question that I think we need to be asking.
Javier, should the president have visited the border?
Look, for a photo op, yes. I don't know what he would have accomplished. It would have maybe helped him out in what he's trying to do. But look, at the end of the day, I've been saying this since last year, is that the president and the Democrats are going to be using these wedge issues to push away from the bigger issue for them in November's election, which is Obamacare. I suspected gay marriage. I suspected that they were going to use the immigration reform, and here we have it. And you have these Democrat or Republican senators like Jeff Flake and others, and John McCain, who you know very well. These people are running cover for the Democrats because they want immigration reform to pass, so they look a lot better. But again, the problem here is that the laws are not being enforced. If we enforce these laws, you'll see less of these kids and other adults moving across the border from down south.
Bridget, about a minute remains. You get the last word. Go ahead.
With all due respect, Javier, I think it's very interesting that you would frame an issue that 8 out of 10 Americans agree they want dealt with as a wedge issue. I think overwhelmingly Americans, business leaders, everyone agrees that immigration reform
is necessary. It's a wedge issue.
I think it's very interesting that
it's a wedge issue.
It's something that most Americans want. 8 out of 10
it's
Americans
a wedge issue.
Need it. I don't consider it something that most Americans
it's
want.
It's a wedge issue.
Well, let me just say 80% of the people may want to see it dealt with, but I think a lot of those people want to see an enforcement policy rather than a policy of amnesty. At any rate, we will continue the discussion. Bridget Todd there in Washington, thank you for your time. Have a great weekend. Javier Manjarres here in studio. Thank you as always.
Thank you.
And again, the website is
shark-tank.com.
All right, shark-tank.com. On the internet, not in the ocean. At any rate, we'd like to get your take. You just heard from Javier and Bridget. What do you think is going to happen with this ongoing crisis on the border? Why don't you contact us via Twitter at Newsmax TV, hashtag America's Forum. New place to get a hold of us on the internet, newsmaxtv.com/comment. And don't forget Facebook. We're coming right back.